I'm Madison, 22, and I always believed my academic excellence would lead me to an Ivy League education, until I discovered my parents had secretly emptied my college fund for my brother's benefit. The betrayal crushed me that night as I stared at the bank statements, tears blurring the drastically reduced numbers. But what my parents didn't count on was my determination and resourcefulness. I found a way not just to attend my dream school, but to graduate debt-free despite their actions. Before I tell you how I outsmarted my entire family, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about turning betrayal into triumph. Growing up in our modest colonial home in suburban Connecticut, I was always the responsible one. From kindergarten through high school, my report cards never saw anything below an A. By junior year, I was debate team captain, editor of the school newspaper, and had already taken 6 AP classes. College wasn't just a goal, it was my destiny. My guidance counselor called me Ivy League material, and I'd been dreaming of the hallowed halls of Yale since I was 12. My brother Ethan was a different story entirely. 2 years younger than me, he was the quintessential charming athlete. Varsity baseball player with an easy smile and social calendar, so packed it required its own planning app. What he didn't have were academic ambitions. C's were totally fine according to him, and homework was something to be completed during homeroom, if at all. Yet somehow, in our parents' eyes, his mediocrity deserved constant celebration while my achievements were simply expected. Madison always figures things out, my dad Richard would say dismissively whenever I brought home another perfect test score or academic award. He was a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm in Hartford, ironic considering what would later happen with my college fund. My mother Jennifer worked part-time as a nurse at the local hospital, arranging her schedule around Ethan's baseball games while expecting me to find my own rides to debate tournaments. The college fund had been promised to me since before I could remember. "This is your future," Dad would say during our annual financial review, showing me the growing balance. "We started this account the day you were born." I watched the numbers climb through my childhood, $20,000, $35,000, eventually surpassing $75,000 by my sophomore year of high school. Each statement was a promise of my future, a ticket to the education I'd worked so hard to deserve. I'd spent countless hours researching universities, creating spreadsheets of admission requirements, and calculating GPA thresholds. My bedroom walls featured pennants from my top choices, Yale, Columbia, Brown, visual reminders of the goals I was working toward. I joined every club and volunteered for every community service opportunity that would strengthen my applications. While Ethan spent weekends at parties, I was participating in math competitions and attending college prep workshops. Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle shift during my junior year. Mom stopped mentioning my college fund during family discussions. Dad changed the subject whenever I brought up campus visits. At the time, I attributed it to them being busy with their own lives. Dad had taken on additional clients, and Mom had increased her hours at the hospital. What I didn't know was that they were preparing for a financial reallocation that would blindside me completely. The signs continued. When Ethan started talking about specialized sports training programs to improve his chances at athletic scholarships, my parents were enthusiastically supportive. "Whatever it takes," Dad said over dinner one night, patting Ethan on the shoulder. "Your future is worth the investment." The statement seemed innocent enough then. I had no idea they were planning to fund his investment with my educational future. During family gatherings, relatives would ask about my college plans, and my parents would respond with vague statements like, "Madison has a lot of options to consider," or "she's looking into scholarship opportunities." Again, nothing overtly suspicious. Many families explore multiple financial avenues for college. But now I recognize these comments as the first threads of the web of deception they were weaving. By the summer before my senior year, I had meticulously planned my application strategy, drafted essays, and secured recommendation letters. My SAT scores placed me in the 99th percentile. My extracurricular activities showcased both leadership and community involvement. Everything was falling into place for my carefully constructed future, or so I believed. What I couldn't see was that the financial foundation of that future had already been dismantled, one withdrawal at a time, to pave an easier path for my brother. Senior year began with excitement and anticipation. Early application deadlines loomed, and I spent every spare moment perfecting essays and completing forms. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Franklin, predicted I'd have my pick of prestigious universities. When my early acceptance to Columbia arrived in December, followed by Yale in the spring, it felt like the culmination of everything I'd worked for. I burst through our front door that afternoon, acceptance letter clutched in my hand, ready to celebrate the moment with my parents.
Mom, Dad.
I got in, I announced, finding them both in the kitchen preparing dinner. Their reactions were oddly subdued. Mom offered a tight smile and a quick hug. "That's nice, honey. We knew you would." Dad barely looked up from chopping vegetables. "Good job, Madison." Confused by their lukewarm response, I pressed on. "We need to talk about the financial aid package." They included some information about payment schedules and deposits. "We'll look at it later," Dad said dismissively. "Pass me that cutting board, will you?" A week passed with no mention of my acceptance or the upcoming financial commitments. Then came the day that changed everything. I needed my passport for a scholarship application requiring identification documents. Mom mentioned it might be in Dad's home office filing cabinet. While searching through the neatly labeled folders, I came across one marked Children's Education. Assuming it contained information about my college fund, I opened it, expecting to find the most recent statement. Instead, I discovered a series of withdrawal slips dating back 18 months, each for significant amounts, along with receipts for Elite Athletic Development Program and Baseball Scout Showcase. My hands trembled as I dug deeper, finally locating a current statement for my college fund. The balance, $12,463. More than $60,000 had been systematically withdrawn. The room seemed to spin as I clutched the papers, struggling to understand. Surely there was a mistake. Perhaps there was another account I didn't know about? I confronted my parents that evening, documents spread across the kitchen table. "What happened to my college fund?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. The uncomfortable silence that followed confirmed my worst fears before they even spoke. Mom looked at Dad, clearly wanting him to take the lead. "Madison," he began, clearing his throat. "We had to make some difficult decisions for the family. Ethan has a real shot at a baseball scholarship, but he needed specialized training and exposure to the right scouts. So you took my money?" I whispered, still unable to fully process what I was hearing. "It wasn't just your money," Mom interjected. "It was family money that we allocated based on need. Ethan's opportunity is time-sensitive. He can't develop these skills later, whereas you." "Whereas I what?" I demanded, my voice rising. "You've always been academically gifted," Dad continued. "You can get scholarships, or start at community college and transfer. There are student loans. You've always been resourceful, Madison. You'll figure it out." The casual way they dismissed my future sent a wave of nausea through me. "You promised me this money for over a decade. I've based all my plans on it. I've already been accepted to Yale and Columbia." "And that's wonderful," Mom said soothingly, as if complimenting a child's crayon drawing. "We're very proud. But those schools will still be there if you want to transfer after 2 years at state." Dad nodded in agreement. "Ethan only gets one shot at this baseball career. The scouts are watching him now. The investment is already paying off. Coach Taylor thinks he might get a full ride to Arizona State." The betrayal cut deep. Not just the money, but the realization that my achievements and dreams were considered less valuable than my brother's athletic potential. That night, alone in my room, I sobbed until my throat was raw. The future I'd worked so tirelessly for seemed to be dissolving before my eyes, sacrificed for Ethan's convenience. The college fund wasn't just money, it was a promise, a validation of my worth and efforts. Now that promise was broken, and I felt broken along with it. The weeks following my discovery were the darkest of my life. I moved through each day like a ghost, going through the motions of classes and activities while feeling completely hollow inside. My parents' betrayal replayed in my mind constantly, each mental repetition another twist of a knife. I'd always known they favored Ethan, but this crossed a line I never imagined they would cross. My usually perfect grades began to slip. An A on a calculus test became a B, then a C+ on my English literature essay. My teachers noticed the change, asking if everything was all right at home. I gave vague answers about college application stress, unable to articulate the true source of my pain. How could I explain that my own parents had decided my brother's baseball dreams were more valuable than my academic future? I withdrew from friends, avoiding lunch conversations about college plans and declining weekend invitations. What was the point of discussing dorm room decorations or potential majors when I had no idea how I would even afford tuition? The growing distance concerned my closest friend, Rachel, who finally cornered me after AP Chemistry. "You've barely said 10 words all week," she confronted me. "What's going on?" I broke down, telling her everything through choked sobs in the empty classroom. Her outrage on my behalf was validating but changed nothing about my situation. "That's theft," she declared. "They can't just take your college fund." But legally they could. The account was in their names for the benefit of me, a designation that offered no actual protection for the beneficiary. Home became a battleground of cold silences and tense interactions. I avoided family dinners when possible, unable to stomach watching my parents fawn over Ethan while my future lay in ruins. On the rare occasions I did join them, the contrast in treatment was unbearable. "Ethan's hitting coach says his swing has improved dramatically," Dad announced one evening, serving himself seconds of lasagna. The showcases were definitely worth every penny. Every penny of my future, I thought bitterly. "I had a meeting with Mrs. Franklin today," I said, attempting to redirect some attention to my situation. "She suggested I meet with financial aid officers at Columbia and Yale to discuss options." Mom's dismissive wave crushed what little hope I had for support. "Honey, we've discussed this. Those schools are probably not realistic anymore. Have you looked into the community college programs I emailed you?" The unfairness burned like acid. "So Ethan gets premium baseball training and I get community college? After I've worked for straight A's my entire life." "Don't be dramatic, Madison," Dad sighed. "Plenty of successful people start at community college. And plenty of mediocre baseball players never get athletic scholarships." I snapped back, immediately regretting the outburst when I saw Ethan's hurt expression. The worst part was that Ethan remained oblivious to the source of the tension. He knew nothing about the financial betrayal, believing our parents had always planned for his special training program. His innocence in the situation made it impossible to direct my anger at him, leaving it to fester and concentrate entirely on our parents. As January turned to February, my depression began to transform into something else, determination mixed with righteous anger. If my parents wouldn't support my dreams, I would find another way. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me fail or settle. I scheduled a meeting with Mrs. Franklin, my guidance counselor, laying out the situation in brutal honesty. "My parents emptied my college fund for my brother's baseball training. I have acceptances to Ivy League schools, but only about $12,000 left for 4 years of education. What are my options?" Her initial shock gave way to practical advice. "This complicates things, but it doesn't make your dreams impossible. Financial aid, scholarships, work-study, and yes, some student loans might create a path forward." She handed me a folder of scholarship applications and suggested I immediately contact the financial aid offices at my accepted schools to explain my changed circumstances. Her matter-of-fact approach didn't erase the injustice, but it offered a starting point, a potential way forward when I'd been seeing only dead ends. That evening, I created a spreadsheet of potential funding sources and began researching independent student status, a classification that would allow me to apply for financial aid based on my income alone, not my parents'. It would be challenging to qualify, but I was determined to find a way out from under my parents' financial control and betrayal. As I worked late into the night, a plan began forming. I couldn't restore my stolen college fund, but perhaps I could build something even better, a future entirely of my own making, one that my parents couldn't take away or control. The pain remained, but now it fueled something productive, my determination to succeed despite them, not because of them. With acceptance letters in hand but insufficient funds to attend, I needed a comprehensive strategy, and fast. Mrs. Franklin had given me a starting point, but I knew I needed to go beyond the standard advice given to college-bound seniors. This wasn't about finding a few small scholarships to supplement my parents' contribution. This was about completely replacing their support. My research began with a deep dive into the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA, system. I learned that most undergraduate students are considered dependent, meaning their parents' income and assets are counted regardless of whether those parents actually contribute financially. The exception, students with unusual circumstances who qualify for independent status. Proving financial abandonment would be difficult, but not impossible. I meticulously documented everything. The bank statements showing the depleted college fund, emails from my parents suggesting community college instead of my accepted universities, and my own detailed accounts of relevant conversations. I began recording interactions where they explicitly stated they wouldn't support my education at my chosen schools. While researching scholarships online at the public library, I'd taken to studying there to avoid the tense atmosphere at home. I ran into Mrs. Eleanor Hamilton, my former AP English teacher who had retired the previous year. She noticed the financial aid forms spread across my table and asked about my college plans. The whole story poured out of me, my voice barely above a whisper in the quiet library. Instead of the pity I'd come to expect, Mrs. Hamilton's expression hardened with resolve. "This is unacceptable," she stated firmly. "Your academic achievements deserve proper recognition and support." What I didn't know then was that Eleanor Hamilton wasn't just a retired teacher. She was a widow whose husband had left her considerably wealthy, the daughter of a university dean, and a woman with extensive connections throughout academic circles. She invited me for coffee the following day, and our meeting became the first of many. "I can't replace your college fund," she said directly. "But I can help you navigate systems designed to be confusing, make introductions to people who can actually make decisions, and mentor you through this process." With Mrs. Hamilton's guidance, I developed a multi-pronged approach. First, I would apply for independent student status through a special circumstances petition, compiling evidence of my parents' financial abandonment of my education. Second, I would apply for every relevant scholarship I could find, focusing on those rewarding academic excellence and demonstrated financial need. Third, I would work part-time during the school year and full-time during summer to contribute what I could toward expenses. Fourth, I would secure on-campus employment that might include housing benefits, such as resident advisor positions after my freshman year. The plan required extraordinary effort. I spent mornings before school working at a local coffee shop, afternoons in classes maintaining my GPA, and evenings plus weekends divided between scholarship applications and my regular job at the public library. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Mrs. Hamilton introduced me to Barbara Wilson, a financial aid officer at a neighboring university who provided insider advice on my independent status petition. "Documentation is everything," Barbara emphasized. Financial aid offices need evidence, not just stories, no matter how compelling. I began building my case methodically. I requested an official copy of my college fund statements showing the systematic withdrawals. I saved text messages where my parents discussed reallocating my education money to Ethan's baseball training. I documented their suggestions that I attend community college despite my Ivy League acceptances as evidence they were unwilling to support my educational choices. Through Mrs. Hamilton, I also connected with James Peterson, a former colleague of her late husband and current alumni interviewer for Columbia. He was appalled by my situation and offered to write a special letter to the admissions committee explaining my changed financial circumstances and vouching for my character. "Universities want students like you," he assured me. "Once they understand the situation, they'll work to find solutions." Meanwhile, my parents remained oblivious to my efforts. I maintained a facade of reluctant acceptance of their decision, occasionally mentioning community college options to keep them complacent. Behind this mask, I worked tirelessly toward independence. The scholarship applications were endless and exhausting. I wrote dozens of essays, each requiring me to reshape my personal narrative slightly differently to match the organization's values and mission. Mrs. Hamilton reviewed every application, her red pen improving my already strong writing skills. "This paragraph doesn't do justice to your achievements," she would note. Or, "Here's where you need to emphasize the adversity you're overcoming." Under her guidance, my applications became sharper, more compelling, and ultimately more successful. A particularly promising opportunity arose when Mrs. Hamilton connected me with the Wellington Foundation, which offered full scholarships to students demonstrating both academic excellence and significant financial hardship. The application required an in-person interview, and Mrs. Hamilton spent hours helping me prepare, asking challenging questions, and helping me frame my answers with confidence rather than bitterness. Through Barbara Wilson, I learned that my independent status petition would be strengthened if I could show I was no longer living with my parents. This presented a new challenge. I couldn't afford to move out yet. Rachel's family offered a temporary solution, inviting me to stay in their guest room until graduation. The arrangement provided not just physical distance from my parents, but documentation of separate residence for my financial aid petition. By early April, my strategy was fully in motion. I had applied for independent status, submitted applications for 27 scholarships, secured a summer internship at a local law firm, and was finalizing details for my living arrangement with Rachel's family. Each component alone wouldn't solve my financial situation, but together they created a possible path to my dream education. The stress was immense, but for the first time since discovering my parents' betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was no longer helplessly accepting their decision. I was actively forging my own path. Whatever the outcome, I would know I had done everything possible to save my future. Moving out of my family home was both emotionally wrenching and logistically challenging. I packed my essentials one Tuesday afternoon while my parents were at work, leaving a brief note explaining I was staying with Rachel's family until graduation. The text messages that followed were a mix of confusion, anger, and attempts at guilt-tripping. "You're tearing this family apart over money," my mother wrote. "We always taught you family comes first." The irony wasn't lost on me. Family first, unless it was my future at stake. My father's approach was more direct. "This childish behavior won't change anything. The money is spent. Come home, and let's discuss realistic options for your education." I responded with polite but firm messages, explaining I needed space to process their decision and prepare for my future. What I didn't tell them was that every day in their house was another opportunity for them to undermine my plans or discover the extensive steps I was taking to secure financial independence. Living with Rachel's family brought its own challenges. Despite their generosity, I felt like an intruder in their daily routines. I contributed what I could financially and helped with household chores, but the underlying awkwardness remained. I was grateful but constantly aware of my displacement, a feeling that fueled my determination to create stability for myself. The independent status petition required extensive documentation and personal statements. I spent hours compiling evidence of my parents' financial abandonment, each document a painful reminder of their betrayal. The financial aid officers requested verification directly from my parents, triggering the confrontation I had been avoiding. My father called me, his voice tight with controlled rage. "We've been contacted by Columbia's financial aid office claiming we've abandoned your education. What exactly have you been telling people?" "The truth," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "That you promised me a college fund for years, then gave it to Ethan instead, and now refuse to support my education at the schools I've been accepted to." "We're not refusing to support your education. We're being realistic about our family's resources. You're making us look like monsters."
I'm presenting facts, he countered.
"The fact is you had over $75,000 saved for my education and chose to spend it elsewhere." Now you're telling me to take out loans or go to community college while Ethan gets specialized coaching. The conversation devolved from there, ending with my father threatening to tell the financial aid office I was lying about the situation. This possibility had been anticipated in my strategy sessions with Mrs. Hamilton and Barbara Wilson. I had already provided Columbia with bank statements and other documentation that would contradict any such claims. My mother tried a different approach, showing up at Rachel's house unannounced one evening with tears and apologies that somehow still justified their actions. "We never meant to hurt you," she insisted on Rachel's front porch. "We were trying to do what's best for both our children. Ethan's opportunities are time-sensitive. You're smart enough to succeed regardless of which college you attend. You decided his potential baseball career was more important than my education," I replied. "That was your choice. Now I'm making mine." These confrontations took an emotional toll, but each reinforced my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for financial support, I was establishing boundaries and asserting my worth. Meanwhile, the scholarship applications began yielding results. I received a $5,000 award from the National Merit Scholarship Corporation and $3,500 from my father's own company's Employee Children's Scholarship Fund, an irony not lost on me. Several smaller scholarships followed, each one a building block toward my goal. The Wellington Foundation interview was particularly nerve-wracking. The panel included 3 board members and an admissions representative from Columbia who had been briefed on my situation. They asked pointed questions about my family dynamics, how I had handled the betrayal, and my plan for financing my education. "How can we be confident that this family situation won't affect your academic performance?" one board member asked. "Because it already has, and I've recovered," I answered honestly. My grades dipped briefly when I discovered what had happened, but I've since brought them back up while working 2 jobs and applying for scholarships. I've demonstrated resilience under far more pressure than most college students will face. My candor seemed to impress them, but weeks passed without news. The waiting was excruciating. A significant complication arose when my father, perhaps realizing the seriousness of my independence effort, attempted to sabotage my financial aid application. He submitted information claiming he was still supporting me financially and included me as a dependent on his tax return. This required additional documentation and statements from Rachel's parents confirming my residence with them and financial self-sufficiency. Ethan, now fully aware of the situation thanks to our parents' constant discussions about my rebellious behavior, reached out via text. His message reflected his complicated position, caught between loyalty to our parents and discomfort with how I'd been treated. "I didn't know the training money came from your college fund," he wrote. "I'm sorry about what happened, but I don't think Mom and Dad meant to hurt you. They really believe I might get a full scholarship." His apology was genuine, but still missed the point. Whether or not he received a scholarship eventually, our parents had gambled my certain future on his potential one, without my knowledge or consent. As graduation approached, my situation remained precarious. I had accumulated about $22,000 in scholarship commitments, and my independent status petition was still under review. Columbia had offered me a financial aid package based on my parents' income, which would leave me with substantial loans even if I accepted it. Mrs. Hamilton continued to advocate behind the scenes, leveraging her connections and regularly checking in with her contacts in the financial aid office. "Don't lose hope," she encouraged me after a particularly disappointing scholarship rejection. "These processes take time, and you've built a compelling case." The week before graduation brought both setback and unexpected support. I learned that Ethan's baseball prospects weren't materializing as our parents had hoped. Despite the expensive training and showcases, the scholarship offers weren't coming. My father's investment in Ethan's athletic future, at the expense of my academic one, was looking increasingly like a poor financial decision. Surprisingly, this development prompted Ethan to take a stand on my behalf. During a family dinner I wasn't present for, he apparently confronted our parents about the unfairness of their decision. "Ethan called me," Rachel reported. "He said he told your parents that they should help you with Columbia since his baseball thing isn't working out. Apparently, your dad got really angry, and your mom cried." This intervention changed nothing financially. The money was already spent, but it marked a significant shift in the family dynamics. For the first time, I wasn't facing my parents' united front alone. The alliance was unexpected but welcome, a small validation amidst the ongoing struggle. As May turned to June, my path remained uncertain. I had secured enough funding to possibly attend Columbia with significant loans, but my dream of graduating debt-free seemed increasingly unlikely. Still, compared to where I had started, betrayed, and without options, even this represented progress. Whatever happened, I had refused to simply accept my parents' decision about my worth and future. That alone was a victory of sorts. The pivotal moment came 3 weeks after graduation. I was working my morning shift at the coffee shop when my phone buzzed with an email notification from Columbia University Financial Aid Office. With trembling hands, I waited until my break to open it, afraid to hope but unable to ignore it. "Dear Madison," it began. "We are pleased to inform you that your petition for independent student status has been approved." I read the message 3 times, tears welling in my eyes. The email continued, outlining a revised financial aid package that reflected my actual financial situation rather than my parents' income. The difference was stunning. Grants and work-study would now cover over 80% of my costs. That same afternoon, another email arrived from the Wellington Foundation. "Congratulations on being selected as a Wellington Scholar. This award provides $15,000 annually for 4 years of undergraduate study." The timing seemed miraculous, but I knew it was the result of months of persistent effort, documentation, and advocacy. Between the revised financial aid package, the Wellington Scholarship, and my other smaller scholarships, Columbia was now financially within reach, with minimal loans required. I called Mrs. Hamilton immediately, my voice breaking as I shared the news. "I knew you could do it," she said, her own voice thick with emotion. "This is just the beginning, Madison. You've proven you can overcome extraordinary obstacles." The next call was harder. Despite everything, I felt my parents should hear about my achievement from me. My father answered on the 3rd ring. "I wanted to let you know that I'll be attending Columbia in the fall," I said without preamble. My independent status was approved, and I've received several scholarships, including the Wellington Foundation Award. The silence stretched for several seconds before he responded. "I see. Well, congratulations." "Thank you." I waited, hoping for more, but not expecting it. "Your mother and I never doubted your abilities," he finally continued. "We just had concerns about the financial realities." It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it was something, a reluctant recognition that I had succeeded despite their actions, not because of them. The conversation with my mother later that day was more emotional. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice quavering. "But I wish you hadn't needed to do this alone. I wish we could have found another way." "There was another way," I reminded her gently. "You and Dad chose not to take it." The acknowledgement hung between us, neither fully addressed nor dismissed. It was a beginning, perhaps, a small crack in the wall of justifications they had built around their decision. Unexpectedly, it was Ethan who seemed most genuinely happy for me. He texted immediately after speaking with our parents. "Columbia? That's incredible, sis. I knew you'd find a way." His enthusiasm felt healing somehow, a reminder that my achievement didn't have to come at his expense, just as his opportunities shouldn't have come at mine. The tension that had developed between us began to dissolve, allowing a more mature relationship to tentatively form. With my college funding secured, I focused on practical preparations. Mrs. Hamilton helped me navigate housing arrangements, suggesting I apply for a resident advisor position after my freshman year to further reduce costs. She also connected me with alumni who offered advice on affordable textbook options and campus jobs with flexible schedules. My summer internship at the law firm provided critical funds for initial expenses and valuable professional experience. The managing partner, impressed by my work ethic and story, offered to continue the arrangement remotely during the school year, providing stable part-time income. A week before I was scheduled to leave for Columbia, my parents asked if I would come to dinner at our family home. I agreed with trepidation, unsure what to expect but willing to listen. The atmosphere was awkward, but less hostile than our previous interactions. My father, never comfortable with emotional conversations, had prepared a folder of information about New York City safety tips and subway maps, his way of offering support without directly addressing past mistakes. My mother had prepared all my favorite foods, a peace offering of sorts. "We want you to know we're here for you," she said as we ate. "We made mistakes, but we never stopped loving you." It wasn't the full accountability I might have wanted, but I recognized it as the most they could offer at that moment. Family healing, I was learning, happens in small increments rather than dramatic moments of perfect resolution. "I appreciate that," I responded honestly. "This hasn't been easy for any of us." Ethan, more perceptive than I'd previously given him credit for, helped bridge the conversational gaps, talking about his own plans to attend community college and potentially transfer to a 4-year school later. "Madison showed me there are lots of ways to make education work," he said, giving me a meaningful look. "And that it's worth fighting for what you really want." As I packed my belongings the next day, this time with my parents' knowledge and hesitant help, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The betrayal had been devastating, but the response it had provoked in me was powerful. I had discovered reserves of determination, resourcefulness, and courage I might never have known otherwise. Mrs. Hamilton arrived to see me off, bringing a care package of dorm essentials and a card containing a handwritten note. "Remember, the obstacles that test us often reveal our greatest strengths. You've already overcome more than most students face in their entire college careers. Columbia is lucky to have you." Standing in my childhood driveway with my packed car, surrounded by the complicated mix of people who had both hurt and helped me, I felt an unexpected sense of gratitude. Not for the betrayal, that remained unacceptable, but for the growth it had catalyzed and the unexpected allies it had brought into my life. The journey to Columbia was both an ending and a beginning. The conclusion of my fight for educational opportunity and the start of the future I had salvaged through persistence and courage. As I drove away, glancing at my family in the rearview mirror, I knew that whatever challenges college might bring, I had already passed the most difficult test of all. 4 years later, I stood in Columbia's grand auditorium in my cap and gown, diploma in hand, having completed my degree in political science with a minor in economics, and with less than $10,000 in student loans. The journey from that devastating night of discovery to this moment of triumph had transformed me in ways I never anticipated. Academically, I had thrived, making the dean's list every semester while balancing part-time work and campus involvement. By sophomore year, I secured a coveted resident advisor position that covered my housing costs. Summers were dedicated to paid internships that built my resume while contributing to my educational expenses. Each semester brought new scholarships and grants as my academic performance continued to impress faculty and donors. Financially, I had become extraordinarily resourceful. I mastered the art of textbook arbitrage, buying used, selling strategically, and utilizing library resources. I learned to network not just for professional opportunities but for educational support, connecting with professors who provided research assistantships and mentoring relationships that often came with stipends or academic credits. My relationship with my parents evolved gradually over those 4 years. The initial sharp pain of betrayal had mellowed into a complex understanding. They were flawed people who had made a serious mistake, one that hurt me deeply, but didn't define our entire relationship. We established new boundaries and expectations, communicating more honestly about financial matters and emotional needs. During my sophomore year, when my father lost his job during company restructuring, our family dynamics shifted further. The financial stress humbled him, creating space for more genuine conversations about priorities and values. When he secured a new position 6 months later, his perspective had noticeably changed. "I understand better now what it feels like when your financial security disappears overnight," he admitted during one of my weekend visits home. "What we did to you was wrong. I wish we could undo it." It wasn't a formal apology, but the acknowledgement meant more than I expected. My mother, always more emotionally expressive, had reached out consistently throughout my college years, sending care packages and checking in regularly. By junior year, we had established a new rhythm of honest communication that, while not erasing the past, allowed for a healthier present. Ethan's journey took unexpected turns. After the expensive baseball training failed to yield scholarship offers, he attended community college as planned but discovered an aptitude and passion for physical therapy. Watching me fight for my education seemed to inspire his own academic dedication. He transferred to a state university, maintained excellent grades, and developed a clear career path focused on sports medicine. Our sibling relationship, strained by our parents' favoritism and financial decisions, gradually healed and strengthened. We began to see ourselves as allies rather than competitors, communicating directly rather than through our parents' biased lens. During my junior year, Ethan called to discuss a challenging course, seeking academic advice rather than athletic guidance for perhaps the first time in his life. "You know what's weird?" he said. "If Mom and Dad hadn't spent your college money on my baseball training, I might never have figured out what I actually want to do with my life." Trying to live up to their expectations was exhausting. His insight highlighted an unexpected outcome of our family crisis. It had freed both of us to define success on our own terms rather than according to our parents' uneven standards. Mrs. Hamilton remained a constant, supportive presence throughout my college years. She became the emergency contact on my university forms, the person I called with good news and bad, a surrogate family member who supported me unconditionally without the complicated history that colored my relationship with my parents. Her guidance extended beyond financial matters to career advice, graduate school considerations, and personal growth. During my senior year, I established a small scholarship fund with money from my campus jobs and internship stipends. The Self-Reliance Scholarship offered $1,000 to a student who demonstrated exceptional resilience in pursuing their education despite financial obstacles. The amount was modest, but the symbolism was powerful, transforming my experience of betrayal into an opportunity to support others facing similar challenges. As graduation approached, I received multiple job offers from prestigious firms where I had interned. The salary negotiations were confident and successful, informed by financial literacy skills I had developed through necessity. My net worth at graduation, while certainly not substantial, was positive rather than deeply negative like many of my peers, a testament to careful planning and strategic decisions. On graduation day, my entire complicated family attended, parents, brother, and Mrs. Hamilton sitting somewhat awkwardly together in the audience. Seeing them there, I reflected on how this achievement was both despite and because of them. My parents' betrayal had forced me to develop strengths I might otherwise never have discovered. Their mistake had led me to Mrs. Hamilton's mentorship. The painful journey had ultimately made me more capable, more resilient, and more compassionate than I might have been on an easier path. After the ceremony, as we gathered for photos, my father pulled me aside. "I know we can never fully make up for what happened," he said quietly. "But I want you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished, not just the degree, but how you did it. You showed more character and determination than most adults ever develop." His words didn't erase the past, but they acknowledged it honestly, a foundation for our continuing relationship built on truth rather than denial. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become part of our strength rather than ongoing sources of pain. Standing there in my graduation regalia, surrounded by my imperfect family and chosen supporters, I realized that losing my college fund had ultimately given me something far more valuable: unshakable confidence in my ability to overcome obstacles, create opportunities, and build meaningful relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The betrayal that once threatened to derail my future had instead become the catalyst for a deeper, more authentic life, one built on my own terms, through my own efforts, and according to my own values. For anyone facing similar challenges or family disappointments, remember that what others take from you never defines what you can achieve. Sometimes being forced to forge your own path leads to destinations far better than those originally planned for you. Have you ever had to dramatically change your plans because of someone else's actions? Did it ultimately lead you somewhere better? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about turning betrayal into triumph. Remember, sometimes our greatest setbacks reveal our greatest strengths.